June 4th, 2024, special meeting of the City Council at 5:55 p.m. Thank you for your patience. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor, it appears that we're having similar Zoom issues. No? Okay. I apologize. Roll call. Councilmember Jackson?
Here.
Councilmember DeToy?
Here.
Councilmember Seaman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Here.
Mayor Massey?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And if we do have any technical difficulties, just let us know and we can pause for a moment to sort those out. I believe approval of the agenda is next on our item.
Yes.
So move,
All
Mr.
right.
Mayor.
This should be a relatively simple matter, Council. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of this item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Jackson?
Aye.
Councilmember DeToy?
Aye.
Councilmember Seaman?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Aye.
Mayor Massey?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Does that bring us to public comment?
Yes.
Would you open public comment, please?
This is a time for members of the public to address the City Council on the e-bike regulations item on the agenda only. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. And first we have Javier Haas.
Good evening, City Council. It's not the first time I've spoken here. My name is Javier Haas. I live in 501 Herondo in the Morings, and I want to speak to the e-bike issue. I've heard from various sources that there appears to be a connection between the teenagers who are riding their e-bikes at night through Hermosa and other cities in the South Bay and the almost nightly fireworks explosions. These explosions have disrupted the sleep of many citizens here in Hermosa Beach for many months now and has affected their health and their quality of life. In addition, it has severely distressed the dogs of this city and caused them to suffer. One real solution would be to enforce a curfew, just an idea, but to enforce a curfew by underage individuals in Hermosa Beach from sundown to sunrise who would be riding e-bikes, so to prevent them from riding e-bikes at night through the city. This would help increase safety, and it would help quash irresponsible and illegal behavior such as the use of explosive fireworks in our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Clint.
Good day, Council. My name is Clint Huff, Tricky Bikes in Hermosa Beach. And from what I heard last night, you're going to put tracking devices on my rentals. Tricky Bikes does not do any high performance or anything to bikes, just regular bikes. The elderly, to get them up in the hill to prospect and take care of just people from out of state to ride up and down the beaches. They usually ride to Santa Monica and back. I just don't want them to have to be able to go out onto the highway, because I see people almost get run over every day out of Hermosa Avenue. Yes, we have a bike lane, but people use the bike lane to zip around each other and take out other people, so it's really obnoxious. So I'm just wanted to come and say that I really didn't want the geo fencing on the bikes, because it's dangerous to get my customers out on the highway. That's all.
Thank you.
And Mayor, I do not have any other speaker cards for this item.
All right. Does anybody else in chambers wish to comment on this item? All right. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody online?
Anthony Higgins, your 3 minutes will begin once you're unmuted.
Yeah, hello. Well, I find myself in the position of having to thank Chief LeBaron and staff for the ordinance and the resolution. It's a good first step. But I do have to bring up, it's only a first step. There are really two broad categories of problems right now. One is e-bike safety and safety to others, and road traffic safety, sidewalk safety. But the other serious problem is e-bike enabled vandalism, crime, intimidation, whatnot. And the ordinance and the resolution do a great job of addressing the safety issues, but that in and of itself is not going to get us to where I believe we need to be in terms of what the public should be doing to assist the police when they observe, and and certainly not all teens are goons, because most of them are not, but we have a group of goons and people of their ilk that are causing trouble throughout the city. And we all know the police can't be everywhere. But until you can bring this under control, you're not going to be really addressing the whole of the problem that the city is complaining about. So, what I would like to hear more about is what residents can and should be doing when they see these goons. Should we be filming them? If we film them and we catch them in an illegal or act, who do we forward the video to? Will the city take that video, identify the goons or the perpetrators, or whatever you want to label you want to give them? Will they take that video, identify them, cite them, and take away their e-bikes, or for a time? What can residents do to assist the police in solving the vandalism, intimidation, crime problem associated with e-bikes? Thank you.
Mayor, we do not have any other virtual hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you. Anybody else wishing to comment who's in council chambers?
Yes, thank you. Willard Weston, 1958 Bayview Drive. My wife and I have lived in Hermosa Beach since 1986. I've practiced dentistry in the Riviera Village since 1987. All those years I've ridden a bike, I've paddled, I've run, I've walked to work and so forth. I currently ride an e-bike. I didn't know until recently, illegally on the Strand. I ride it with the motor on. I ride it at the appropriate speed. For me, everything I've heard and everyone complaining about has to do with the speed, that people travel too quickly on the bikes. We've had a speed limit on the Strand at 8 miles an hour forever. We've all been around and see that every few years there's a horrific accident on the Strand that historically has always involved a pedal bike, just going too quickly. Once again, the speed. It's really not the vehicle. So my point is we're all talking about the e-bike. The e-bike's not the problem, the speed is the problem. We've had a speed limit forever, and if we continue to victimize the e-bike even more and make it more illegal, who's addressing that? Who's administering that? We're creating new codes, new laws, when all we need to do is go down and enforce our 8 mile an hour limit that we have. So if we make the e-bike with the motor illegal, which it already is, and create more fines, how come we're not down there now already enforcing our 8 mile an hour, which is the problem? And so my suggestion is please back up, take a look, where's the problem? The problem is the speed. The speed is the problem. And we haven't addressed that. So how we make more bigger penalties, are we gonna not address that? We're not fixing the problem. So are we just gonna address it now because the penalty's bigger, we can get more money? It still doesn't fix the problem. And in a couple weeks here, coming up any time, we've got all the young kids from 9 years old up going down to do junior guards, and my 2 kids didn't. And so rite of passage, if you live west of the highway, or even some families east of the highway, to ride your bike down to junior guards. So now it's illegal to ride an e-bike for these kids down the Strand. So now we're going to put these kids, 9, 10, 11, 12, up to 15-year-olds on Hermosa Avenue in their e-bikes. Do you guys want that? Do you want your kids pedaling down Hermosa Avenue on an e-bike because they cannot go on the Strand? And if you've ridden an e-bike, they're hybrids. They're designed to use the motor. They're miserable to pedal without the motor. So I look at it and say it's the speed is the problem, not the bike. Please back up, enforce the speed. Don't penalize the bike. Please don't push our kids out onto the public streets and off the Strand. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers wishing to be heard?
Good evening, Mayor Massey, City Council, City staff. My name is Steve Collins. I'm part owner of Hermosa Cyclery in Hermosa Beach, and primarily I'm here to talk about the geofencing component of the legislation you're looking at. So I have a lot of respect for Dr. Weston. He's a friend of mine, and he makes some really good points, and I know that a lot of people in the community feel exactly like he does. The predicament is there's a law that prevents e-bikes, people riding e-bikes with the motors on, and that seems to be well supported by a lot of vocal people in the community. And as a business that welcomes being part of the community, we're supporting them, and we, for years, have not rented e-bikes. And by not renting e-bikes, we've helped prevent more e-bikes from coming onto the Strand. So it occurs to me that now that other shops are moving in and renting e-bikes, that our abstinence from renting e-bikes is no longer helpful. And so the idea of geofencing came up, and perhaps we could geofence rentals so that they work everywhere else except where they're prohibited, where the city doesn't want them. So we took it upon ourselves to research geofencing. We bought a device for a pretty practical amount of money. We installed it, and I'm as surprised as the next guy. I was really elated that it worked so well. I ride the bike out on the Strand, the motor stops in a few seconds. You ride it off the Strand, and the motor comes back on. You can ride it around the city. You can ride it on the bike paths that go from here to Santa Monica, where it's legal and supported, but you can't ride it on the Strand in Hermosa or the Plaza. So that seems like a really good workaround for businesses in Hermosa Beach who want to rent motorized bicycles that they be geofenced so they can't be used on the Strand. We know from previous activity with the e-bike, e-scooter fad that people will ride these anywhere they feel like it and anyhow they want to do it. Hermosa Cyclery can't do this unilaterally. We cannot geofence just our e-bikes because people will gravitate to our competitors who have e-bikes that are not geofenced and ride them up and down the Strand. So I'm asking you to support geofencing broadly for Hermosa Beach so that we can support the laws that you've been advocating for so many years. And I think this is actually a concrete step forward, and it doesn't require the use of police officers to enforce, which I know would be right up your alley to help support something that is a positive step forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers wishing to comment on this item? All right, hearing no one. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else online? All right, hearing and seeing no further public comment, I close public comment and bring it back to council. Madam Clerk, I believe that brings us to our agenda item, which is municipal item 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do have a brief PowerPoint that I will wait to gear up, but as I'm sure as everyone knows, the item before you tonight is an urgency ordinance dealing with e-bikes and arguably other wheeled conveyances in the city. Next slide, please. So this has been a topic that has been before this council numerous times. Back in September of last year, direction was to bring back an informational item. In October of that same year, the council then directed staff to bring back an item with more specific options on the regulation and use of e-bikes and bikes in the city. Next slide, please. In January of this year, 2024, staff provided City Council with a report and even a draft ordinance regarding electric bikes in the city. City Council directed staff to explore and bring back an item that is not duplicative of other laws, like those found in the Vehicle Code or other state laws as it pertains to e-bikes and bicycles in the city. At its May 28th, 2024 meeting, the City Council, during future agenda items, directed that this item be brought back as soon as possible. Due to scheduling issues in the summer months, we are now before you a mere 6 days later. Next slide, please. So the city's existing regulations on e-bikes are found in numerous portions of the Hermosa Beach Municipal Code. Violations are currently infractions. Specifically, Section 12.20.220 prohibits the use of the electric motor on the Strand and Pier Plaza and Beach while using the e-bike, as noted by many of our commenters. Section 12.2.230 regulates wheeled devices on the Strand and Pier Plaza and prohibits the use of these devices in the dedicated walk zones, among other things. And finally, Section 12.28.010I limits the use of bikes and e-bikes in city parks to only those designated roads or drives provided for the purpose. In other words, if it's not permitted to ride your bike there, it is prohibited. Next slide, please. As this council and the public are aware, other jurisdictions have also addressed the item of e-bike regulations. Our neighbors to the north, Manhattan Beach, via urgency ordinance, adopted numerous regulations more detailed in the staff report and instituted fines of $500, $750, and $1,000 for each violation and then each subsequent violation. Huntington Beach also implemented updated regulations, and noteworthy amongst those is that they included options for an officer to impound an e-bike or bike if a juvenile is cited or arrested for violating the pertinent city regulations in that city. Next slide, please. So what does the urgency ordinance as drafted before you do tonight? First, it adds section 10.12.175 to the city's municipal code and prohibits riding in an unsafe, prohibits the riding of e-bikes in an unsafe manner, prohibits the use of e-bikes under the influence of alcohol or drugs, requires a helmet for all riders under the age of 18, and then reiterates that prohibition on the use of e-bikes on the green belt. I did want to note that the language in the ordinance is broader than just e-bikes. It states e-bikes, motor-driven cycles, pocket bikes, or any other electric or motorized conveyance. This is done on purpose to ensure that any new or updated technology is still subject to our regulations, but in no way does it legalize items that are not otherwise legal. What comes to mind is, I believe that, as our chief has noted in his previous updates, that a Suron, which is basically a Chinese-made electric dirt bike, has become somewhat popular. And if it's otherwise illegal to ride, in no way does this ordinance legalize it. Instead, what it does, it probably just adds another enforcement option for the city in dealing with something like that. So that is the reason why that language is broader than simply just electric bicycles, but it's the council's prerogative, should you guys so desire, to limit it just to that. Next slide, please. So further, the urgency ordinance does three other kind of foundational things. First off, it makes violations of the city's e-bike as well as the Strand, Pier Plaza, and park regulations related to bicycles and e-bikes in those areas subject to the city's administrative citation program. Excuse me. It allows and further allows for the impoundment of these bikes or e-bikes if a juvenile is cited for violation. As I spoke in January, impoundment, the city, that's going to be a very route process in terms of the city's going to have to be able to release that bike to a responsible adult upon payment of the impound fee. City cannot use that impound fee to generate revenue or anything like that. Basically, what we would do is just use that to recover the cost of impoundment. And then finally, as noted by a few of the public commenters, the ordinance does add a chapter to the city's business license regulations and requires that any business that rents e-bikes in the city must equip the e-bike with geofencing or other technology that disables the motor in the areas that the electric motor is not allowed. As drafted, we have an August 4th, 2024 deadline for that to happen, with, of course, a case-by-case carve-out at the city manager's discretion if the business hasn't taken plausible and meaningful steps towards compliance. Next slide, please. So I did want to note a few tweaks that staff is recommending to the urgency ordinance that was included on your agenda. First, the last sentence in section 10.12.175A1 is just a slight formatting error. Once again, this is A1, there's A1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of those substantive requirements in 2, 3, and 4 are their own subsection, and so they stand on their own. Thus, that last sentence, other examples of an unsafe manner include but are not limited to with the list, semicolon, is no longer necessary, and so therefore that can be deleted. Next slide, please. Finally, this is somewhat of a substantive change. This is the section 10.12.175C2. I do apologize for the small font. It was kind of a large subsection. Staff is recommending removing the option to impound in the case of an adult being cited. After research and consultation with our chief of police, the efficacy of this option is simply not worth it, if at all. As I said before, we are not allowed to keep the personal property, i.e. the e-bike, of anyone. Thus, if an adult is cited, all they simply would do is follow that e-bike to wherever we are impounding it, pay the fee, which once again cannot be used to generate revenue, and then we would be forced to give them their bike or e-bike back immediately. This greatly reduces any deterrent effect of impoundment and simply places kind of an unnecessary administrative burden on our police officers. Thus, staff is recommending removing it for adults, but as you can see in that first clause, maintaining the impoundment option for juveniles, which once again requires a responsible adult to at least come down and pay the impoundment fee. Next slide, please. Also attached is a resolution with the proposed fine amounts for violating the provisions of the urgency ordinance if adopted. The dollar amounts were borrowed from, at least for the first three, were borrowed from our neighbors to the north in Manhattan Beach. The chapter 5.82, which deals with the rental of e-bikes, are a bit lower, but once again, that is entirely up to the discretion of the city council. Next slide, please. So in sum, staff recommends that the city council consider the attached urgency ordinance with the edits mentioned in my PowerPoint and verbal staff report here. I must note that I'm sure, as you guys are all aware, this is somewhat of an evermore issue. This ordinance is not going to be a silver bullet that tomorrow, fingers snapped, all e-bike issues in the city are going to be vitiated. Instead, it's meant to add to the enforcement toolkit that our officers and staff members have. But once again, that's just one of the ways to address the issues, as our chief has mentioned numerous times here. Once again, helps in the enforcement, but not much in the other ones. Further, staff is going to continue to monitor this. And of course, this is not written in stone, even though it is an urgency ordinance. If something is not working or we think we need to add something to it, we will readily bring this back. And staff kind of has a goal of, should you guys adopt this, evaluating its merits over the summer months, and then bringing the item back in the fall for kind of a report, and should you guys need anything, I want to make any further changes. As an urgency ordinance, it does require a 4/5 vote, and the ordinance contains findings related to the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety. I believe that's section 1 in the ordinance. And then, of course, consider adoption of that resolution establishing those specific administrative fines for violations should the urgency ordinance be adopted. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report. I'm, of course, available for any questions, as is our chief.
Thank you, Patrick. Procedural question. We just had a public comment period that was dedicated to this agenda item only, as instructed by the city clerk. That is the public comment for this agenda item.
Correct.
So we will not be doing our usual progression of questions, comment, then deliberation. So
Correct.
Okay. All right. So we can move straight into comments and deliberation, or excuse me, questions and deliberation as we see fit. I have a few quick questions for you. You touched on, obviously, this is presented to us as an urgency ordinance, so it requires a 4/5 vote, as you said, and anybody voting for it as an urgency ordinance has to vote on the basis, in part, that they find a current and immediate threat to the public peace, health, safety, and welfare. Is that correct? I mean, that's a finding that a 4/5 majority of the council has to make in order to enact this urgency ordinance. Is that right?
That is correct, and the facts supporting that are found in Section 1. If the council feels that those need to be bolstered or modified, we are all ears.
Okay. My next question is, we wanted to bring back rules that are additive to what's already in the California Vehicle Code and existing municipal code and so on and so forth. So I have a few questions along those lines. Section 4 of the draft ordinance, which proposes to add Chapter 10.12.175 to the municipal code, subsection A1 there defines, first of all, it prohibits riding in an unsafe manner, and then defines unsafe manner to mean, in part, a rider violating any existing Hermosa Beach Municipal Code, California Vehicle Code, or other existing law. Does this mean that we could cite anybody for violating the California Vehicle Code and then also cite them for riding in an unsafe manner, so it's an additional violation?
Right, so no, that would not be the thrust of this ordinance would not be to have two different citations. Instead, what this is meant to do is to allow the city access to its administrative citation program, i.e., so it would, in the way I envision, be an option. So that if someone were violating the vehicle code, that would be a way for the city to say, hey, our code says this. And so once again, maybe that also similarly avails the officer in that moment the option to impound it if it is a juvenile as well.
So, in practice, if somebody's violating the California Vehicle Code and our officer makes contact, they could give them an administrative citation for riding in an unsafe manner because they're violating the California Vehicle Code without citing them for violating that underlying section of the California Vehicle Code?
I mean, I would probably not in every instance, i.e. if someone is, on PCH or on a dedicated city street, probably not. No, the California Vehicle Code would probably govern. However, that California Vehicle Code also entails a lot of other just general requirements that are not specific to a street. One of them dealing with, the operation and use of helmets. So that is why that inclusion of the California Vehicle Code was there. But once again, if that you are right, that is somewhat duplicative. It was meant to be as broad as possible, but if the council is uncomfortable with that can readily be removed.
Okay. And then my next question relates to subsection A4, which prohibits riding an e-bike under the influence, essentially. My understanding is that when you ride a bike, even a beach cruiser or whatever it is, you're subject to the requirement that you be unimpaired to drive. And if you are drunk driving on a beach cruiser, you can be cited and taken to jail for driving under the influence. Is that also applicable to e-bikes? So somebody, for example, riding an e-bike down Hermosa Avenue, but over the legal limit, if they get pulled over by a police officer and they blow over .08 or whatever it is, that they could be cited and arrested for driving under the influence under the, is it the California Vehicle Code? I'm not even sure. It's Section 502 of something, I know that.
Correct. So that is my understanding, yes. So the vehicle code does allow that. However, the purpose for this section is, once again, should there be, I don't want to say confusion, or maybe obviously getting a driving under the influence citation is an extremely punitive event. And so once again, this would just allow an additional enforcement mechanism, once again, maybe not all the way rising to here is basically a DUI for riding your bike down Hermosa, as compared to we're going to issue you a citation, or of course if you're a juvenile, we're going to go ahead and take your bike or and impound it.
So in other words, we could cite somebody under this municipal code for driving an e-bike under the influence without the repercussions that entail citing them under the state code?
Correct.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Let me look to my right. Councilmember questions. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on Mayor Massey's question about the biking under the influence and the provision that you removed with regard to impounding an adult. So on Mayor Massey's cruising while impaired, what happens to the bicycle of the individual who's arrested for? Is that not impounded?
So,
Should it not be?
well, I mean, so that's really I guess a judgment call. The unfortunately, I shouldn't say that. Our administrative citation and impoundment rubric, due to due process and the fact that we cannot take someone's personal property for an extended
What do you do
period
with
of
a
time.
car?
No, so that is entirely different.
Right.
You are correct, but as drafted, even if we included that adult impoundment, you are correct. They would impound it, and then if that adult then walked up, notwithstanding the fact that they may be impaired, and they said, I would like my e-bike back, I'm going to walk it home, the police would, it would be my advice that upon payment of the impound fee, the police would then.
And the citation fee.
And the citation fee, correct, yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, got it. And what happens if Mayor Mike and his buddies are cruising on their Tour de France bikes doing 20 miles an hour on the Strand, and they get pulled over by RPD? Are the citation amounts for reckless riding, is there what's the difference in terms of consequences?
I may have to rely upon the police. I'm not entirely sure of the exact citation and/or penalty for, as you said, a Tour de France style peloton bombing down the Strand going 25 or 30 miles an hour. Of course, as noted earlier, we do have the speed limit that is 8 miles an hour. I believe that's subject to an infraction, but I'm not sure if there's an additional reckless cycling or bicycling on the Strand.
So would we have the option this evening, because we've got several issues. We've got obviously the speeding issue on the Strand, reckless driving on the Strand, off the Strand. We tend to see speeding by e-bikes as well as regular bikes. So if we were to say we came up with the citation amounts modeled after Manhattan Beach, for example, 500, 750, 1,000, whatever that is, could we impose that citation amount for somebody on a Tour de France bicycle who blows through the walk-only signs and is speeding on their Strand and riding in a reckless manner?
Right. So the kind of two different things. The walk-only zones, that is included in the draft resolution and draft ordinance. So regardless
of what you're
correct.
riding.
Regardless of what you're riding. And then I believe it's the same section. Yeah, it's 12.2.230E deals with dangerous speeds and of course talks about the 8 miles per hour speed limit. And that applies to any wheeled vehicle or device, so which would include Mayor Mike and the peloton.
And his peloton.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so that is on the Strand then?
That's
Or
on the
just-
Strand, correct. That is just on the Strand or Pier Plaza, correct. Right.
Okay, so Mayor Mike, peloton, 20 miles an hour, same citation structure could be imposed for him as well as for an e-bike violator?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, to my left, questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
You got speed up awareness.
Hold off, Mayor Pro Tem, sorry. Councilor DeToy, sorry.
Thank you. And just to confirm, because there's been a lot of scenarios tonight, what is being proposed from staff is you're still able to ride an electric bicycle on the Strand with the motor off on the Strand.
That is correct, outside of the dedicated walk zones.
Correct. Okay. See if I can quickly find my notes, otherwise I'll let it go over to Dean. But then the opposite is true for the Greenbelt. So there's no e-bikes allowed on the
So I wouldn't.
way this is proposed.
Well, so I wouldn't say that. I would say that this clarifies and makes crystal clear that no e-bikes are allowed on the greenbelt.
Even with the motor off,
Correct.
as proposed. Those, subsection 3.
Yeah, correct.
And then, I don't know if staff can answer this or one of the operators, if you're okay with that. How much does it cost to install a speed limiter or one of those devices?
Geofencing.
Mr. Collins, would you come up and give us at least the rough cost of one of those units, the geofencing units for an electric bike? And let us know are these attachable, do they work with any kind of e-bike?
Right. So I purchased one for $100, one unit, $100, $20 a month, and installed that. It requires installation on the e-bike using one of the sensors. There's multiple sensors. I use the brake sensor. When the brake sensor is activated, it turns the motor off. It's readily available information. I essentially studied it. I had it vetted with an expert in e-bike servicing and training of technicians to confirm the technique. So for the purpose of e-bike fleets, the cost drops down to about $84 a unit for the device and about $16 a month for the service to, say, put these devices on 25 different e-bikes.
Just to confirm, 1.6 a month, 16 per unit?
16 per month for
Per bike.
per bike, right? And this was I settled on this particular company because I found them first. I'm aware that there are cheaper services, but they require more effort to understand them and to implement them. And my goal was to just confirm that it's doable at a practical price, but I'm aware that there are cheaper solutions, which if you pass this, I intend to investigate. And if I find something, I am happy to share that. This is not a competitive secret. This is something I think is good for the entire community that all of us adhere to, but that would be on the high end of the spectrum, what I just described. And compared to, obviously, the capital purchase of an e-bike at $1,000 or $1,500, $100 more, or $86 in this case, or $84, is really a rounding error on the finances. So it's the cost, while they may sound expensive if for your personal use, for the purpose of business, they're inconsequential financially, even at the low quantity I purchased them and installed it for.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr.
Steve,
Mayor.
while you're here, just on that point, what is a typical e-bike rent per hour for?
I'm sorry?
What does a typical e-bike in our market rent for on an hourly basis or a half-day or full-day basis?
So just to give you some perspective, a conventional bike will rent for about $14 an hour. If you multiply that by 2 hours, a lot of the companies have minimum 2-hour increments. So the rental of an e-bike would be about $48 for 2 hours, $50 in that area, $100 all day. Conventional bikes, for comparison, would be about $14 an hour and $46 all day, for comparison.
So basically, once you absorb the capital cost, the monthly cost is,
Right.
if you rent it for about an hour each month, you've paid for the monthly cost.
I could tell you without a doubt it'd be inconsequential on conventional bikes at a much lower rental fee. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of experience with, the finances of renting conventional bikes, and e-bikes rent for about double that.
All right, and the concern was raised that those devices could impact folks who aren't even riding on the Strand, if I understood the comment correctly. So for example, someone who's staying with a friend up on the hill, up on Prospect, and wants to ride an e-bike to get to and from the beach every day. The geofencing would only be basically the Strand and parks and other places that we don't allow e-bikes to be ridden. So presumably, I mean, would there be any time from somebody going from, say, Hermosa Avenue up to Prospect Avenue that the geofencing would be triggered and power down?
No. Yeah, this technology is tried and true, and this was not invented by a small company. These are big operators, and the people we're dealing with are reselling those technologies. The technology is accurate to 10 feet. And so I know somebody was talking about the green belt, and the green belt's got like a 10-foot perimeter or 10-foot border on each side at least. So you could easily geofence the center where you're concerned about people riding e-bikes, and it would not affect Valley or Ardmore on either side, not even close. It's accuracy of 10 feet, and so you would draw your lines so that you are nowhere near the streets you want to allow. So in the case of the Strand, I geofenced and I drew a line across the homes that line the Strand, because I knew people would want to ride on the Beach Avenue that goes parallel to the Strand, and it works flawlessly. It does not interfere, and the technology is very accurate. And I've never come across any examples where the technology fails and stops a bike when you're nowhere near a geofenced area. I've never heard of that. Now, I'm no expert, but I've tried it, and it works flawlessly, and I've also read about it to vet what I'm trying to advance here to make sure that I'm recommending something that works.
Would that mean that, just an added clarifying question, so if we were to include the green belt in geofencing, that it's precise enough that somebody going east-west, so from Hermosa Avenue up to Prospect via 2nd Street or 8th Street or Pier or 27th and Gould would be able to cross the green belt without being impeded by the geofence?
That's right. With the particular platform I have, and I have no reason to believe it's any different with any other platform, you have an unlimited number of boxes you can draw, and it really is that simple. That's why I was so thrilled that it worked. You're essentially just on a computer, and you're drawing boxes around things you want to prohibit, and you assign the bikes that you want to have prohibited. And so essentially, in between, say, the two streets, 8th Street and I think 2nd Street goes through, you would geofence about 10 feet away from 8th and 2nd Street, and then you would geofence around 10 feet away from Ardmore and Valley, so that your borders are nowhere near where you want to allow riding. And the accuracy of 10 feet, you're not going to be riding down one of those roads and have it reach out and turn off your motor. Yeah. And in addition, not that I really like this feature of this technology, it takes about 10 or 15 seconds for your motor to shut off when you enter the Strand or the Plaza, which is fine for this purpose. If you're looking to stop people from riding all up and down the Strand where it becomes dangerous, but if you happen to cross into a zone briefly, it's not going to shut your motor off right away. You have time to get through, so it does not reach out at you and turn off your motor at all that I'm aware of.
All right, and one more question. If you have a fleet of, let's say, 50 rental e-bikes, do you program all 50 bikes just through one computer platform?
That's right. In fact,
you don't have to, in other words, you don't have to program each and every one of your 50 bikes
right.
to geofence them.
In fact, I actually, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but it sure seems to me like a keeper of this service for the use of it from Redondo Beach to Santa Monica would be ideal. Now, I don't want to burden the city or any police departments with it. You only need one of these. You have an unlimited number of geofences. You can geofence the Greenbelt and Manhattan Beach. You can geofence, I don't know, underneath the pier, parking lot in Redondo Beach, and do all these with one, and then you can just add as many bikes as you want. So essentially you build this geofence, and then you just start adding the number of your bikes. So you get this device, it has a specific code that corresponds to that device, and you enter that number, a unique number, into this software, and you can have a list of hundreds or thousands of these bikes and not have to program them individually. So you do it once, and they all work the same way. It's pretty amazing. It's so incredibly simple. I mean, when we heard that people like, the big operators were using geofencing technology, it sounded daunting and beyond understanding at this level, but it's readily available and it works really well. It's pretty fun.
Great, thank you. I'm looking to my left now. Questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually tried the geofenced bike. Worked great, had the motor on, rode down to the Strand, got onto the Strand with it. I guess for about 10 or 15 seconds I was illegally riding with the motor on, but it shut off. So it works pretty good. I think it should be a great improvement. Anyway, getting on with my questions. Well, I did have a question regarding the geofencing. Elderly and disabled people, as I read it, are still allowed to use motors, correct? Motorized electric bicycles by disabled and elderly. I thought I read that.
Correct, yeah, so
Okay.
it's subsection B in section
So
4.
one of the speakers brought up the fact that elderly and disabled, so they would presumably be able to rent a bicycle that doesn't have the geofencing on because they would be allowed to ride the electric bike on the Strand if they come into the shop and they're elderly or disabled or have trouble riding.
Correct, yeah, that is duplicative of our current prohibition on wheeled and motorized devices. There is an exception for, of course, those, disabled and
Right.
pursuant to the ADA.
So is the plan to notify the shops that
Correct,
they
yes.
must comply within 30 days and they're informed of that exemption as well?
Correct, yeah, so it's not 30 days as drafted, it's August 4th, which I believe is 60 days.
Okay.
With a, as I said before, this is not meant to be draconian or punitive. If someone reaches out to us, says, hey, I got them, I have a fleet of 25, they only delivered 20, the 5 are coming next week, we're going to say, okay, that's fine. We're not going to,
Okay, so getting back to some of my other, I'll bring up the speed since that was mentioned by a speaker as well as Councilmember Jackson. I believe the police has told us in the past it's difficult to issue speeding citations alone. Are we interfering with those speed fines to raise them at all, or is that not part of this? I didn't see it anywhere in this draft ordinance as far as speed, specifically speed citations.
Oh. Of course it went out. So the city's municipal code that lists that speed limit is found in 12.20.230, and that subsection is wheeled vehicles or devices on Strand, Walkway, and Pier Plaza. As drafted, the resolution includes that section in the administrative citation fine schedule with a 500, 750, and then 1,000. But once again, I can't comment on nothing in this ordinance would seemingly void or make it easier for them to figure out, not figure out, but
Yeah.
hit him with the speed gun and issue a speeding ticket that would hold up. As I'm sure you're aware, you can challenge it based off of anything,
Right.
and things like that.
Because I sympathize with the comment that people make that speeding's a problem. We need to deal with the enforcement and all that. But backing up a second to the urgency matter of this ordinance, we have the ability to adopt an urgency ordinance if the council believes there's a current immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare. If we do not believe that, we can adopt a regular ordinance, which would come back in a month for a second reading and a public hearing, correct?
Correct, yeah. If it was the will of the council tonight that the urgency findings could not be made, however, you would want to waive full reading and introduce on first reading this ordinance, that would be fine. We would then bring it back. It's a bit awkward because usually we kind of give the notice for the ordinance for the first reading and then it comes back on consent. That's not legally required, even though it probably is best practice. So it would be a bit reverse where then we would give the notice of it and it would be a full muni matter at
Right.
as you said, at a subsequent meeting.
So presumably July 11th, it could happen at that meeting, and then we would enact a regular ordinance on that date, right? That would be about the timing?
July 11th?
Yeah, that's when our next regular meeting is, right? Or no?
Oh yeah, so no, we probably wouldn't be able to get it on the next on the 11th. There's some noticing requirements that we would have to provide, and since it's already Tuesday and the 11th is 7 days from now, I don't believe we can make those. So it would probably be the next meeting or the first meeting in July for second reading.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm eager to gather data to determine if there's a legitimate threat. So I was wondering if maybe I could ask the police chief to come up and ask some questions about accident data. Is that,
Sure.
we'll do that? Thank you. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
So with regards to accident data, do we have data to show that there is an increase from year to year or progressively an increase in accidents, injuries, that type of thing going on the Strand, Plaza, and Parks?
So the data that we have specific to your question covers the entire city. And, you know, I know we're talking about the Strand, Plaza, and Parks, but we as the police department focus on traffic safety everywhere, so we have that data. The one thing I can tell you specific to the Strand, we went back 2 years and looked at the data, and as of right now, in the last 2 years, we have 0 reported accidents on the Strand with bicycles.
Okay. And presumably, I'm assuming that several months ago, there was maybe an increase of reports or complaints, and there was was there a stepped up enforcement action that could have caused maybe some better compliance now? I'm hearing from people more recently that it appears that people are more compliant recently. So do you have any data to suggest that, or any way to?
The data is very difficult to determine compliance when you have a standardized foundation of 0 accidents. So it's hard to know if there's been any compliance because there's no accidents.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, unless there's anything else you want to add to that. Okay, thank you. Then another question on the ordinance. The Manhattan Beach passed a specific ordinance that didn't allow a backseat passenger unless it had a seat. And I didn't notice that on our ordinance. Is that included in the unsafe use?
No, actually, that was not included. If that's a provision that you all would like inserted, that would be your prerogative tonight.
Okay, we could insert that as an extra requirement. Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Seaman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the geofencing thing, and perhaps this would be a question for Steve. Geofencing controls the on-off of a bike in the zone, the motor in the zone. Can it control the speed also? So is it possible to set a speed limit within a geofenced zone, or it's just on or off?
There is, and the only reason I didn't tinker with it because the law was pretty clear: motor on, motor off, and it's so. But in that same list of features, you can toggle that on, and if you go over 17 miles an hour, it tracks you just like any other GPS device. If you go over 17 miles an hour or 10 or whatever you want to do, it'll shut the motor off. From what I understand, it doesn't have the ability to throttle the motor, much like you would the throttle on your own bike, but if you hit a certain speed, you won't get any help from the motor. So yes, and that's a standard feature of that technology.
Okay, great. Is it possible to track the bikes that have geofencing?
Yeah. When Dean came down and rode the bike, I noticed, because I have it set right now so I get an email when the bike moves in and out of the geofence area, just for kicks. Yeah. I couldn't possibly do that with a fleet of bikes. It'd be annoying. But when he took it for a ride, I got alerted, so then I brought up the software and I could see everywhere he rode. I know where he went. I was watching.
If he put it in the trunk of his car and tried to make off with it, you could find out where the bike is?
Right. So a lot of times this technology is used for exactly that. I've seen a lot of implementations where people want to find their bike. Now, if the savvy thief steals your bike, and it'll just rip the thing off of there unless you have it concealed inside the frame of the bike. So there's ways to deal with that.
So there would be a added benefit to the rental company that you could go. Kid comes back and go, hey, somebody stole my rental bike, and you go, well, okay, let's just find out where it is.
That's right. Well, that's why the big operators do that, so they can find their devices and round them up. That's standard use of it.
Yeah. Okay, and then you probably don't have this information. It's just a general question. Maybe somebody does. Well, maybe you do. Do we have any clue as to how many rental bikes versus owned bikes there are on the Strand? I mean, even close. Is it 50/50 or there's for every 10?
Not even close. No, I would say, if I was going to throw a number at it, I would say rental bikes account for 3, 4, 5% of the bikes on the Strand. It would be my guess.
That's all.
Right, and but that's not to. I don't want to dismiss it because it's an appreciable number. For the sake of just kind of throwing numbers out there, if you have a rental fleet of 25 bikes, on a busy day, they'll all go out. In fact, they'll all go out a couple times. And so that would be 50 entries and exits from the Hermosa Beach Strand. If you have 3 or 4 operators with 25 bikes each, we're changing our insurance now so that we can get into the e-bike rental business, hopefully with geofencing. But we have 200 conventional bikes. We're going to not convert all those over, but we're going to convert some of them. So if you have 4 operators with 25 bikes each, that's 100 bikes coming and going once or twice a day on a busy day. That's a couple hundred entries onto the Strand and exits. So it's an appreciable number, but comparatively it's small.
Compared to the number of e-bikes that are owned, though, we don't
That's
know.
right.
We have no clue as to how many of those are.
It would be rentals would be a small number, a small fraction of that.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Steve, very much. And by the way, while I'm saying thank you so much for, first of all, for years, not renting e-bikes because it was a safety hazard and a problem, while other operators in the area did. I think that's such a noble thing for you to do. You're truly a rare person among us, and thank you so much for doing that. And thank you again for putting so much effort into researching this and finding this and putting this geofencing thing together just because you're you. That's a wonderful thing. Well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
That's a great service to the city. Appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Excuse me. So that brings me to my last question. I'm not sure, maybe this is just a general question, asking the rest of council. I think, first of all, I'm very much for geofencing. I think it's a great program. I think it's a good idea, and it's going to help us tremendously on controlling some problems on the Strand, especially speeding on an e-bike. But in the questioning I just asked, what do we do about the non-rental e-bikes on the Strand? Is it too difficult or too impossible to require everyone who has an e-bike on the Strand to have a geofencing unit on his bike? I think that's kind of impossible, right? But what do we do? I mean, this is a good step. It's a great step, and I'm totally for it. But is it enough? And is there anything we can do as a second step to kind of control, I guess, the majority of e-bikes on the Strand that are not geofenced? So I just want to throw that out there and see if any other opinions on that. What do we do about that? What can we do?
Well, I think I'll just take a stab at answering, and then I'll invite my colleagues, and then I know Mayor Pro Tem has a question to follow up for Steve Collins. But I would say there's maybe a couple things at least that we could do. First of all, we could simply prohibit e-bikes or motorized vehicles of any kind from the Strand. What we hear from our PD is the challenge we have is identifying when somebody is under power on a e-bike on the Strand, because you're, under our current rules, allowed to have an e-bike on the Strand provided that you're pedaling it yourself. Sure. But distinguishing when somebody's actually being assisted versus when they're just pedaling it is difficult. So you could just prohibit them, e-bikes from the Strand altogether, and then they would use Hermosa Avenue, for example. As far as requiring geofencing for personal bikes, I had a note here just to myself along the same lines, such as, could we require geofencing for personal bikes for example, juvenile repeat offenders of the rule saying you can't ride them on the greenbelt or something like that? Like if we catch the same kid 2 or 3 times, at that point we could say, look kid, you got to put a geofence device on your bike at your cost, so that your bike no longer can go on the Strand because you obviously can't keep yourself off the Strand or the greenbelt or whatever the case may be. So it's ultimately a judgment call. I mean, draconian, semi-draconian, not draconian, whatever the case may be. I mean, what we're talking about are different tools in the toolbox.
I appreciate that. and I understand, and clearly we can't do any of those things this evening. And I'm not suggesting that we do.
Well, I think we can.
we can.
Sure. I mean, we can craft whatever urgency ordinance we can, provided we make the finding that
Yeah.
there's a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare.
Well, yeah, we can. I mean, but I'm not sure we have an appetite for it.
Sure. Well,
Tonight.
that's part of the discussion we'll get into as soon as we're all done.
All right. So I'm kind of not excited about requiring everyone to have geofencing on there because for instance, we were talking about elderly people. I suppose in those cases, they would not be required to have geofencing on their e-bike because they need the motor to help them ride along. Is that correct? According to this,
You mean on the Strand?
Yeah.
Or where we don't allow motorized
where there
vehicles?
would be geofencing.
Yeah, if you're, I forget what the terminology is, if you need motorized assistance,
Yeah. Right.
you're on a rascal or you're on an e-bike or whatever it is, then you're exempt from the rules, basically. You can use the motor on the Strand, for
Right.
example.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
And you're still subject to the speed limit, though, I think Councilor Jackson mentioned.
Sure.
All right, Rep. Pro Tem.
Thank you.
And do you want Steve to come back up?
Yeah, I just wanted Steve to come back up because Councilmember Seaman asked a question about limiting the speed of the bike, and I just wanted to clarify that a geofencing cannot control the speed of a bicycle. Once it shuts off, it's off and you're under power. So a geofencing unit cannot slow the bike down once the power's been turned off. Power's either on or off.
It does not apply the brakes, but if, in theory, the bike is going fast because it's under electrical
Yeah,
motor
when it's on.
assistance, then yes, it does slow it down. If it's going faster, then they would be able to pedal it. But it's not like part of the equipment. It's not a throttle, so it doesn't
Right.
control the speed. It just stops you. If you're using the motor to get yourself up to 28 miles an hour and it stops you at 10, then presumably it's controlling the speed by preventing it, and maybe that's
But
semantics.
that's if it's under power. In Councilmember Seaman's example, it's when you're riding on the Strand, your geofencing's already turned the bicycle off.
Well-
The geofencing cannot keep you from going more than 8 miles an hour because the power's been turned off.
So, right, so
being
if
under
under
power.
pedal assist, which
Yeah.
e-bikes do pretty well when you pedal them without motors, you could potentially muscle it up to a fast speed like the road bike guys do that you're describing. So yeah, you can ride an e-bike as fast as you want under human power.
Yeah.
Yeah, like any
Okay.
bike.
So the
doesn't apply
geofencing
brakes.
cannot control the speed of a bike when the power's off. Right? Yeah, let's
Well,
face it.
it sounds like, yeah.
It knocks the
you can-
power
It doesn't
off when
put
you're on the
brakes on.
Strand.
Yeah, it doesn't put the brakes on. So
Yeah, okay.
you can't
Right.
stop them from pedal
Okay,
powering
all
it.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was the thing I wanted to clarify with that question. So, and I mean, there's no way in the world we can require every bike to have a geofence. That's crazy. Or not allowing e-bikes at all when the power's off on the Strand. Lots of people don't have regular bikes anymore. They depend on e-bikes to get around. And I think that would be really way out regarding that. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to just jumpstart the conversation. First, let me say, I appreciate all the comments. Dr. West and I have seen your comments on social media. Back when I was on social media, I respect your opinions generally and agree with them almost all the time. I will gently push back on a couple things. So I'm comfortable with this as an urgency ordinance or as an ordinance through the regular process, because I'm comfortable making the finding that there is a current and immediate threat to the public peace, health, safety, and welfare. That admittedly seems counterintuitive when our data indicates that we haven't had any accidents on the Strand or in our parks. But I've heard the complaints. I've seen the behavior myself several times on Pier Plaza. I've been walking down on a busy, sunny weekend day in the walking area on the Strand, thick with people, and seen groups of kids on e-bikes weaving through a very thick shoulder-to-shoulder crowd of people, nearly missing people. So I think it's safe to say, from my perspective, we're lucky we haven't had any injuries, let alone serious injuries, as a result of e-bike collisions on the Strand in our parks. So I'm comfortable making the threshold finding that would justify an urgency ordinance. The next item that I'll just gently push back on is, I don't think speed is the only problem. I think where the bikes are being ridden is the problem. I've also observed them being ridden on sidewalks, which is obviously against the vehicle code. How they're being ridden is a problem, right? I mean, riding fast, riding wheelies, is some of the behavior that puts other people at risk, and increases the risk of traffic accidents for both the safety of the riders and the safety of the public generally. And then the last question was a good one, which was, do we want kids on e-bikes to have to use Hermosa Avenue to get to junior lifeguards, for example? I have a kid who goes to junior lifeguards. She doesn't have an e-bike, but, I ride with her sometimes on Hermosa Avenue. I ride with her sometimes on the Strand, depending upon how crowded it is. And I vastly prefer her riding on the Strand. There's no question about that. But I do feel comfortable with her riding on Hermosa Avenue, as long as she knows the traffic rules, knows how to stay visible, knows how to keep to the right. And so kids who have e-bikes will still have the option, do still have the option of riding on the Strand, provided that they power those bikes themselves once they get onto the Strand. They just use the pedals. And so, they can make their way to wherever they're going for JGs, whether it's 14th Street or 2nd Street or whatever the case may be, through a combination of, riding north-south, Hermosa Avenue, Valley Drive, whatever it is, and then whatever the last stretch is on the Strand. They just have to power down and get themselves there once they get onto the Strand. So I'm comfortable on balance that that's not an onerous obstacle for kids who have e-bikes. If they have an e-bike, they should be old enough to be able to ride the e-bike on the street, and not just on the Strand. And the same goes for conventional bikes as well. So my sense of it is, with respect to the ordinance as proposed, this is for my colleagues' benefit. Here's my thinking as it currently stands. For the proposed section 10.12.175A1, this is the unsafe manner provision. I would strike the language defining an unsafe manner as riding in violation of the municipal code or California vehicle code or other existing law. I would just simply define unsafe manner to mean operating in such a way as to constitute a danger to the operator or passenger, other motorists, other riders, or pedestrians in the area, and leave it at that. To clean that up, to make sure it's not duplicative of existing law. The helmet rule in A2, I'm fine with. Kids should be wearing their helmets, and they should be wearing them properly. Down low, over the crown of their head. Number 3, with respect to prohibiting riding on the greenbelt, I'm also okay with that. It's a little bit incongruous when you think about the fact that we're carving out the greenbelt in particular, and we otherwise have rules for parks. And I think this lends itself to a broader question that we might want to answer, because we might want to add just a general prohibition of riding e-bikes in our parks. Because my understanding is right now you can ride e-bikes in our parks on pedestrian paths. And I understand riding non-e-bikes on pedestrian paths because they typically go slower and the riders are typically more consistently in control of them. That on those narrow paths, it's more compatible with pedestrians using them in our parks. E-bikes are a different thing. I'm open to the idea that you just can't take an e-bike into our park, period. You got to just take it to the park and either walk it in to lock it up or lock it up on the perimeter of the park and then go into the park. If you want to ride a bike in the park, ride a non-e-bike. But that being said, A3 talks about the greenbelt specifically, and I understand why that is. It's because the greenbelt expressly allows bikes, and it has obviously the walking path and the biking path right up the middle of it. So what we're doing is basically, as proposed, is carving out the Greenbelt entirely as a e-bike free zone. What I would propose for consideration is whether we want to just apply that blanket prohibition to our parks generally, just so it's easier to enforce, to, enable our law enforcement to keep people in our parks safe. And then number 4, the driving under the influence, I would strike that entirely. If somebody's drunk driving an e-bike, I think they should get the full extent of the punishment under the state code. They should go to jail. The e-bike should be taken just like a car is taken, impounded, and so on and so forth. The administrative citations and penalties, I'm fine with the impoundment for juveniles who are violators, with the modification that the city attorney suggested, which is striking the language regarding impoundment of e-bikes for adult violators. And then I'm fine with the geofencing technology. I think everything we've heard makes it seem cost-effective and not in any way impeding folks who would rent e-bikes and use them consistent with our rules. The last item that I will mention is, it seems to me that we ought to do what Manhattan Beach did, which is to prohibit passengers on e-bikes where there's no seat for the passenger. I mean, I see it all the time, 2 or 3 kids on an e-bike on like a book rack instead of a proper seat. So the bike clearly is not designed to have multiple kids on it, so it's a danger to the kids riding the bike, everybody. So that seems like a fairly easy one. So I'll close by saying that, there's a lot of value to e-bikes. They provide a lot of mobility to a lot of people. They're an emerging technology. We're going through the process of trying to figure out how we ensure that the folks who ride them in Hermosa Beach ride them responsibly for their own benefit and for the benefit of the rest of the community. And so I view this as an iterative process, and this is, just one more step to give our law enforcement folks the tools that they need to deter irresponsible riding, to make sure that folks can ride e-bikes, but if they do so, they do so in a way that's safe for themselves and everybody else. All right. Who wants to go next? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Regarding the DUI, as I understand, the reason it's written like that is so the police have the ability to choose either way they want to cite a DUI driver. Is that essentially the way it's written? They have the option
Sure.
to use either go the vehicle code or not.
Correct.
So we're, in a way, restricting the police's options by revising it the way you're suggesting then. Is that what you're proposing then regarding the DUI?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should write into the municipal code a lesser penalty for driving an e-bike under the influence than you otherwise have for driving any kind of vehicle, including a non-motorized bike under the influence.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm not so sure about that, but I agree with all the other things you stated except the parks. One, why can't we say no bikes at all in the Greenbelt? Because I thought they were prohibited. Apparently they're not.
No, that's what the proposed ordinance does, is it prohibits e-bikes on the Greenbelt.
It says e-bikes.
Right.
What about all bikes?
Correct. It's the e-bikes on the Greenbelt. Right now, you can ride an e-bike or any other kind of bike on the Greenbelt.
Right.
Just
But
like you can ride them on the paths
the
in our parks.
proposal, though, is just no e-bikes on the Greenbelt. Did you want to change that to no
No,
riding of all bikes on the Greenbelt?
no. What I'm talking about is I was suggesting that we might want to just provide a blanket prohibition for riding e-bikes in parks anywhere.
Right.
Meaning both the Greenbelt and all the rest of our parks.
Okay, but getting back to the Greenbelt, paragraph 3, it says no e-bikes are allowed on the Greenbelt. What about regular bicycles? Don't we want to prohibit regular bikes on the Greenbelt? I thought they already were, but I'm a little...
No, the zoning allows regular bikes.
Oh, so we have a problem with the zoning? That the zoning allows bicycles on the
Actually,
Greenbelt?
I don't know that if I recall. I thought it was open space 1 is the designation for the Greenbelt, and that designation does allow bikes.
Okay. Same thing with the parks then? Bicycles are allowed in the parks, regular bikes?
I think they're allowed on the paths.
On the paths, yes, okay, all right. Okay. Oh, I know, I had another question. Do we need to add a thing about stunts and tricks, or is that also considered driving in an unsafe manner?
Right.
It's included in that, we don't need to add that.
Once again, the point being, if a youth does a wheelie and
Yeah.
by himself, it's one thing. If someone does a wheelie in the middle of a crowded pier plaza, that is kind of what we're geared at here with the unsafe manner.
And with regards to sidewalks, you stated something about sidewalks. You wanted to do something about sidewalks or not? Did you say anything about that?
No.
You were just talking about in the parks, right?
All I said was, I think there's problems beyond just the speed at which people are riding e-bikes. It's where they're riding them, how they're
Yeah,
riding
okay,
them.
all right.
Their
Okay.
obedience to traffic laws. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Seaman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too agree with almost everything you said in general. I also see the need for the urgency ordinance. Summer's coming up. I think it's actually here already, and kids are out of school, and I think we need to get this on the books as soon as possible. So I see the urgency in that. E-bikes in the parks in the Greenbelt, I think we should prohibit them completely. And the problem with that is that I've had several people tell me they walk their dog every day on the Greenbelt, and kids on e-bikes, when they're riding on the Greenbelt, and well, probably happens in the parks too, but on the Greenbelt for sure, the Greenbelt becomes kind of a motocross track because there's lots of little jumps and hills and valleys and stuff to jump off of and land down and come and do a lot of motocross tricks. And so kids are kids, and they have a tendency to want to do that. I think the Greenbelt is a place of serenity and peace and calm, and I would really like to see no bikes on the Greenbelt, but I understand the problems with that. So I agree with a complete ban of e-bikes on the Greenbelt, no matter what speed they're going, and I think that should extend to the parks also, for the same reason. E-bikes, you can, even though you're on a path, somebody's over there, you go, hey, Joey, and you go across the grass with it, and an e-bike can rip up grass in the park. So I think it's just wise to ban e-bikes from parks and Greenbelt altogether. I agree with you with the no seat, no passenger business. I think it's unsafe. I've seen kids, 2 or 3 kids on an e-bike carrying a surfboard, and that's dangerous, just the way it is. So I think no seat, no passenger. Let's see, I have no problem with the in and out as written. I have no problem with the rest of this ordinance as written. So, including the DUI, that's the way it is. So, that's my opinion on this, and I plan to support this as a matter of urgency with those caveats.
All right, thank you. Looking to my right. Councilmember DeToy.
Thank you. I'm an e-bike owner. I haul around 85 to 90 pounds of kids on the back of my e-bike. I'm also the guy that has ridden a bird scooter in Washington, D.C. and hit one of the geofenced areas and stopped. And then I was very upset because I had to push very hard to get across the Washington Mall. But they're there for safety and for crowds. That being said, I'm also a guy that hauls the 90 pounds of kids to the playground at various parks in Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach. I will not be supporting that if that is the majority of what the council says. I pull up to Veterans Park and park right there next to the playground. Valley Park's by my house. The kids want to ride the e-bike over there. I slowly go on the walkway over there. Now, Chief can attest to this. The other day I was sitting there with my kids, and there was a group of 8 or 10 teenagers, I presume, that were launching off by the benches in Valley Park and trying to get air. That behavior should not be tolerated because it messes up sprinklers and grass and everything else and is a danger. As far as banning them on the Strand, I will not be supporting that. Like the doctor mentioned, there's times where I will be facing wind going up the Strand and coming back from Redondo Beach. And yes, I have broken the law, so Chief, you can arrest me. I have my e-bike on level 1, which 80 pounds, 90 pounds of kids on the back. I'm going like 5 miles an hour with pedal assist. I'm getting blown by with single speeds, with people going to play volleyball or go surfing or whatever. Speed is the issue, in my opinion. That being said, e-bikes are heavy, especially with kids on the back, and there's inertia and some other physics that play into it. And helmets will save lives. The education that we're doing at the schools is great. I've noticed helmets are not only being worn properly, but actually being clipped. I would love to see an incentive program out there, partnering with local ice cream shops or whatever, that if one of the motors sees a group of kids doing the right thing, go get a free ice cream. Kind of reinforce good behavior as opposed to being kind of the draconian big government, because e-bikes are not going away. And it will take either the state or a federal regulation to get, demand that they're all geo-fenced or whatever safety thing. But, I have a class 2 e-bike. Within 5 minutes of owning it, I turn it into a class 3. I mean, it's that easy to reprogram it to go above 25. I'm just being real. I'm a terrible politician because I'm probably too honest. But, I love the e-bike. My kids love the e-bike even more. There's nothing better than cruising down, again, going to Redondo Beach. We go all over, go up to Manhattan, not on the Strand in Hermosa Beach, but they're here, and they're great tools for kids if they're used right. I don't want to handcuff to law enforcement, so I am supportive of a lot of the ordinance that's before us tonight. But again, if it's banning e-bikes, motor or non-motor on the Strand, I won't be supporting it. And then I'm even kind of torn on the greenbelt, because it is, do we want, if regular bicycles are on there, they're allowed, they've been allowed for decades. OS1, I remember that from our conversation about the DG that's getting proposed on the greenbelt. And I remember the mayor mentioned that bicycles are currently allowed on the greenbelt, which I did not know, and remember that from a few years ago. So I do agree with the mayor about, and my other council members, about the alcohol, who did mention, I think if someone is operating a vehicle, we shouldn't just give them a cite if they're acting a fool and they are under the influence. Give them a BUI. And everything else besides that, I am in favor of. Those are my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I don't think your concern about banning e-bikes on the Strand or in the parks, or on the Strand, excuse me, is a concern, because I don't think we discussed that, but I didn't hear anybody say that that's something that they wanted to add. But, I am interested in it in the parks. But anyway, we haven't finished going around the horn, so.
I did mention the geofencing. The cost is, I would like to push out that deadline a little bit more if that is something, the will of the council. So instead of August, maybe January next year or this time next year, just to kind of give them more of a glide path.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. Thank you for our speakers today. You can't go a day in our city without having a conversation about bikes and e-bikes. And what I tell particularly the parents, as I think the mayor mentioned this last week, we need to check ourselves as well. We are constantly complaining about speed and blowing through stop signs and inattentive e-bike riders. When you go out to this intersection or any other intersection, you can talk to our law enforcement in the back, and the worst perpetrators are the people behind the 5,000-pound vehicles, making rights on red, blowing through stop signs, and there'll be more people killed tonight in LA County, pedestrians hit by cars in cyclist hit by cars than an e-bike injuring somebody. With that in mind, I think it is important to get a hold of this. I like what Manhattan Beach did with the administrative citation schedule. I tend to be a little harsher and would like to see the 500 for the first and 1,000 for the second, as opposed to the 500, 750, then 1,000. I think it's a little harsher, and I think appropriate in a lot of cases, because as we've seen with some of these other administrative citations, people just don't mind paying because they feel they can do whatever they like. Speed is the problem in my mind. I have no problem with somebody riding their bicycle responsibly through the Valley Park or South Park, as you see, but it's the folks who are tearing up the grass on their e-bikes or their regular bikes that are the problem. With regard to the Strand, it's speed and recklessness. It's the Tour de France biker and the e-biker, and I see it every day. I see them going down Hermosa Avenue, the cars driving like idiots, and I also see the e-bike riders and the Tour de France riders thinking the rules don't apply to them. So I am happy to hear that the administrative citation schedule would be consistent for the Tour de France riders as well as the e-bike riders on the Strand. The walk zone, which is important because Chief can tell you some stories about folks that choose to say bad things and ignore them when they ask them to get off their bikes. And I think smacking them with a $500 administrative citation would send a message. And we always, everyone likes to talk about the goon squad, and they're from outside. They're not from here. You go on the Strand any time of day and night, and it's not the goon squad, it's our kids. And it's also our adults. I mean, those folks that are blowing through the walk-only zone, 9 out of 10 are adults who are just cruising, who think the rules don't apply to them. And I understand the guy that's on his bike and he's sort of walking it with his feet, right? That's where our law enforcement have discretion. They understand. Just like if somebody's riding their e-bike, pedal assist, if they're doing 8 to 10 miles an hour, it's discretionary. Just like when someone's speeding 32 and a 30, right? But when somebody's doing 40 or 25, it's pretty clear. And when somebody, as we saw this weekend, as we see every day, is trying to negotiate all the pedestrians in the walk-only zone, not getting off their bike, operating in a reckless manner, I'm glad that we'll have the ability to administer an administrative citation. Also agree, no more riders than a bicycle is built to support. Back in the day, I remember had a kid on the handlebars and another one on the bar in the middle, then there'd be one on the back standing up, and then I'd be in the seat. And, that's great when you're living out in Booneyville where you don't have, 5,000 other people on bicycles and inattentive drivers in cars. So,
Or when you're not going 29 miles an hour.
Or when you're not going 29 miles an hour. So, the helmet is something I also agree with. Must be on and properly strapped. There was somebody on the forum was upset because his kid had his helmet on but wasn't strapped and got a $500 administrative citation from Manhattan Beach. So, good job, Manhattan Beach. There's some things I think we should do on the Strand with regard to our signage and maybe lowering it a little bit and making them more visible. We can talk about that later. But with regard to the urgency ordinance, I'm in support of, with the qualifiers I mentioned. If I can ride a regular bike, I have no problem with an e-bike, provided they are following those same rules. So I guess that's consistent with your points, Councilmember DeToy, about the green belt and the parks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let me see if I can bring this home. How many council members are ready to vote to make the finding that there is a current and immediate threat to the public peace, health, safety, and welfare to justify moving forward with an urgency ordinance? I see 2. I see 4. Okay, that's 5 of us. All right. My proposal with respect to section 1012-175A1 is to just strike the language regarding that would define an unsafe manner to include a rider violating the municipal code, vehicle code, or other existing law. So that it would just be unsafe manner means operating in such a way as to constitute a danger to the operator, passenger, other motorists, other riders, or pedestrians in the area.
And then others struck per the city attorney's recommendation.
Other examples is stricken, that last sentence. So are there 4 of us who are supportive of A1 as I propose to modify it?
Question while we're mentioning this.
Yeah.
Do we have, all 4 people have to agree on each of these edits? Because it's got to be a 4-1 vote.
We're just going to walk through and see if there's 4 for what we're proposing and then modify it. But
yeah.
at the end of the day, yeah, what we adopt has to be approved by 4 of us.
Okay, well, I thought just the urgency part had to be approved by 4, but everything, okay, I'm
Well,
good.
then we would just fall back to what 3 would agree on if 4 did. That's all.
No, it has to be 4.
No,
On everything.
in order to pass this as an urgency ordinance, we have to have an ordinance that is proposed that 4 out of 5 of us vote for.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay.
Okay, so
So,
A2 would stay as proposed. A3 I would suggest we say, no electric bicycle, motor-driven cycle, pocket bike, or any other electric or motorized conveyance shall be allowed in any city park, something like that.
park and greenbelt.
Well, the Greenbelt is a park. Do we define it as a park? And
Well, it's already in there as the greenbelt. If we just add all parks, we're there.
we could, is the Strand,
So going to the green belt, I would advise, if it's will of the council, I would say on the green belt and in any other city park, just to be
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
and would that include, for example, the Strand or Pier Plaza? I mean, do we need to carve them out separately? Because
They're
does
in
the
there,
umbrella
too.
category of parks include the Strand, Pier Plaza, the Greenbelt, and all of our parks like South Park, Valley Park, Clarkfield? Or do we define them separately?
I don't believe that the umbrella includes the Strand or the Greenbelt.
Okay, so if we were just to modify it to say, it shall not be allowed on the Greenbelt or in any city park, that would leave the rules as they are for the Strand, Pier Plaza, and the prohibition will only apply to the Greenbelt and city parks.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. All right. Are there 4 of us who support extending the prohibition beyond just the Greenbelt as proposed to extend to all city parks, which would change our rules? Right now, e-bikes and other bikes are allowed only on pathways in our parks. Right, this would just be, a blanket prohibition on e-bikes in the parks in addition to on the Greenbelt.
I'm in favor of that.
Councilmember DeToy is no on that, so I think this is where we lose Councilmember DeToy. But Councilmember Jackson,
Well,
Mayor Pro Tem.
we could just make it except for the paved paths
You wouldn't
in
need
the
to-
parks.
You wouldn't need to do that because that's the current rule. So if that's what you want, then you would go with the language as proposed. Because right now, the only place in a city park you can ride a bike of any kind is on the paths.
Right, but you want to exclude them from the paths in the parks.
E-bikes.
Generally, because I think given their speed and the nature of them, they're more of a danger than bikes. And also, I see it all day long, similar behavior to what Councilmember DeToy described at Valley Park. On Fridays at the farmer's market, you go down to Clark Field, and there are teams of kids ripping around the entirety of the park on the grass and everywhere else. And it's too easy for, our law enforcement has to draw distinctions. They have to say, well, was the kid meaning to ride on the grass, or did they just sort of lose their balance and go off the path? Whereas a clear prohibition
I'm inclined to be with Councilmember Detoya on this of not excluding. Could you just explain a little bit more why you believe that they should be excluded?
Because I use them all the time with my kids, and they're heavy, and I don't want to park my bike far away.
He likes to do wheelies on the grass in Valley Park.
Because the snack bag usually
mean?
stays in the bike instead of carrying that in too.
Yeah,
And we don't really have bike locks on the exterior of our parks.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councilmember Detoya on that.
All right, that's
But
fine.
you're a responsible bike rider, e-bike rider, Mike.
That's what you think.
And the kids, 10-year-olds on the park aren't.
But, you
So
know, they
that's-
can't
that's the
be anywhere
difference.
else in the park except on the
That's
paved paths.
the existing rule. So do we have 4/5 for that A3 as proposed, which is just to prohibit e-bikes on the greenbelt? Are there 4 of us in support of that?
I'm for the greenbelt and the parks, but if the greenbelt's the only thing we can get, then I'll settle for that.
Good. I'm there. Mayor Pro Tem, you're there? Gentlemen?
I'm going along with Mike on this, so.
Why? Don't
Unless
you have
we
an
wanna
idea of
just-
your own?
Well,
I've never, I mean, we don't have the access points for the green belt for bikes that are that easy, unless you're coming really north-south in town. If that makes sense. So I feel like the bike, actually I do actually use my e-bike, honest conversation. I go up 21st from Valley to Ardmore there to get my daughter from school on my e-bike, so I've operated an e-bike on the green belt, so I apologize.
Well, it's apparently legal right now. We're discussing whether it should remain legal. So
I'm
Like, this is
in
my
favor.
confession session of everything I do illegal.
there's
I'm
nothing to
in
confess.
favor of not allowing them on the greenbelt. That's, it was the parks
All
that
right, well,
I was
then
going
that's-
along with.
Right, so we got 3. Let's expedite this conversation, gentlemen to my right. Is there one of you who is in favor of A3, or are both of you opposed? Because if both of you are opposed, let's strike it and let's move on.
And Mr. Mayor, while they're thinking, may I also, sorry,
How long is this going to take? Go ahead.
2 seconds. So
No, I know, not you.
Oh.
I'm saying the decision-making.
our parks, so our municipal code is quite outdated. It references horses and all of that, riding horses. But it also references a 15 mile per hour speed limit. And so perhaps for your consideration, if you wanted to align that with what the speed limit is for the Strand, that might be a consideration, because 15 miles per hour is quite fast on a narrow path in the parks. But that's currently what it is.
But I think we're limited to e-bikes in this agenda item, so if
Yes.
we want to come back to impose a
Yes.
8-mile-an-hour speed limit on the greenbelt, I think that would be a separate agenda item.
Okay.
Because it would be generally applicable beyond just e-bikes.
Or 8 miles an hour on the path through the parks, right? That's what you were referring to?
I didn't hear you.
Or an 8-mile-an-hour speed limit through the parks.
Correct, but Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Massey mentioned that since the item's only dealing with e-bikes, it wouldn't impact the remaining vehicles that are allowed currently on the park. So we will have to bring that item back to you to refresh or update the municipal code.
All right, gentlemen, A3. We got 3 votes for it. Is there a 4th?
I can live with it.
All right, there's 4. All right, then my proposal is to strike A4 entirely. Just leave it to the vehicle code or whatever
So-
state code it is for driving under the influence.
And if I could have Officer Keaton Dadigan just share with you, or we can just see what you think here. The vehicle code, by eliminating the administrative option, I'm not certain if council members are doing so because you believe it's a lower consequence. It's actually a higher consequence than biking under the influence, the BUI, as it's been mentioned. So Officer Dadigan can share that with you, what the distinction
I
is.
would love to hear it, because my understanding was if you get pulled over riding a bike under the influence, you're subject to the same penalties as if you get pulled over in a car riding under the influence, meaning you go to jail, your bike gets impounded or whatever the case may be. If I'm not, and it's a several $1,000s fine and so on and so forth, but if I'm mistaken, Officer Dadigan, please feel free to correct me.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Actually, in California, 4 years ago, they have changed that. Now, biking under the influence is a misdemeanor. However, it is only a maximum $250 fine with no jail time. So the vehicle code would be a lesser penalty as this proposed ordinance would be. Driving a vehicle is completely different, tens of thousands of dollars, but a bicycle is a maximum $250 fine that carries no jail time. And I have the vehicle code if you'd like it for your reference is 21200.5. So it's a completely different vehicle code than driving under the influence in a motor vehicle.
That is good information. Thank you. I was unaware of that change. Even with that, I still feel the same, that I'm more comfortable with adding tools to the toolbox.
Well, this adds it by keeping it here. The officer can use either choice, and that's why I was in favor of keeping it in. So.
It is, and the fine is larger, so it's actually a stiffer penalty, albeit without a misdemeanor, but, more easily cited by us. So I'm okay either way. Do folks want to keep A4 in?
I say leave it.
Okay. It sounds like there's 3 of you and 4 of you, so I'm okay with that. So A4 stays in. And then I think everything else was fine, except we had a suggestion that C2 strike all the language.
Oh, and Mr. Mayor, we were going to add a 5 that it is going to say no person riding or operating a bicycle, e-bike, motor-driven cycle, pocket bike, or any other electric bike, motorized conveyance shall transport another person upon said vehicle, unless such passenger is seated upon a separate seat attached.
I'm going to get to that.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
I'm going to get to the add-ons as soon as we get through where we are with the proposed language.
Got it.
So C1B is fine, I think, with all of us. And then C1 is fine with all of us. And then C2, the proposal was to drop the language that allows the impoundment of the bike ridden by an adult violator. I'm fine with that. Are there 4 of us that are okay with all of that? B and C and in their entirety. And then section 5 is just the admin citations and penalties. Are there 4 of us fine with that? Or is anybody not fine with that? All right.
Any consideration for the 500, 1,000 as opposed to the 5, 750, 1,000?
I like 5, 7, 500 for a first penalty is a steep fine.
Right. No, it is a steep fine. So if the person doesn't get it after the first fine, then 1,000 is considerably steeper.
It is twice as steep.
Exactly.
Well,
So,
I'm okay with it as proposed, but this is not one that I would vote against it simply if there were 4 of you who wanted to bump it up as you proposed, Councilmember Jackson. Are we doing the fine schedule here?
Correct, yeah, it was attached
another
as a
attachment.
separate resolution.
And it's 500, 750, 1,000?
1,000, and then for the violation of the rental ordinance, for the rental, that's 250, 500, 750.
Okay. I'm okay with it as proposed, but I'm open to suggestions. Councilmember Jackson would like to make it 500, 1,000, and then what? 1,500?
I'm good with 5 and 1,000 and then 1,000 thereafter.
Okay, 500, 1,000, 1,000. And then what about the one for rentals? Are you okay with it?
I'm okay with that.
All right, so what's the will of council on that? Either way,
Where's the fine code?
it's an attachment. That's the ordinance. You got to go back to
So
that.
the fine is what again?
It's in the draft resolution.
Yep.
And it is for everything sans the rental. If you rent an e-bike, you have to have it geofenced. That fine, the geofence fine, is 250, 500, 750. For all of the other provisions contemplated, maybe Councilmember Salmon has it, it's as drafted, 500, 750, 1,000. I believe what Councilmember Jackson is advocating for is just 500, 1,000, 1,000.
The only question I had on that, Councilmember Detoy, I believe you stated that you were not in favor of banning e-bikes if they're following the speed limit. Is that correct on the Strand? Did you say you were not in favor of banning e-bikes on the Strand completely?
I thought we were talking about the fines.
We aren't either. No one is.
Yeah,
No, with the motors on. I thought you suggested with the motors on.
We're talking about the fines, right?
Well, that has to do with geofencing, so that's why I was curious about.
Right, so no, so the geofencing, that fine would be geared towards the individual business. I.e., if we come into Pat's Bike Shop at some point in the future and Pat's Bike Shop has all these e-bikes with no geofence, the city would then probably say, hey, get a geofence. If Pat says, no thanks, I'm not doing this, we would come back and issue them a $250 citation for offering the rental of an e-bike in the city without the proper geofencing technology. The geofencing, that fine is not geared towards individual owners. We will not be, if you have a private e-bike and you are down on the Strand, we will not be saying, let me see your geofence, and if you don't have it geofence, we're giving you a $250 citation. That is not the purpose nor supported by the language of the ordinance.
Okay.
All right, let's keep this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, let's keep this moving. Go ahead, Councilmember Seaman.
Regarding the fines, while I appreciate Councilman Jackson's point of view, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this, the Manhattan Beach ordinance, is to hear for us to discuss and possibly adopt, which we're doing now, is because these ordinances have teeth in them. $500 fine, to me, that's pretty hefty, especially for a 10 or 12-year-old who's done one of these things and gets a $500 ticket, and then a $750 ticket for the second time and $1,000 for the third time. I think I'm so pleased that we have these fines in the first place. So I think maybe, my personal opinion, I think we should stick with these amounts that we have now. They seem plenty toothy right now, and perhaps we can take another look at this in a while and see if it's not being effective enough, then we can raise them. But I'm kind of okay with where it is.
I concur with Councilmember Seaman on that one.
Okay, Councilmember Toy, what do you think?
I'm fine with how they are.
Okay, so that's 4 of us. So, Section 5, the fines stay as they are, and then I think there's no proposed amendments to Section 6, 7, 8, or 9. So the balance of the proposed ordinance would be adopted as proposed. And I think there's 4 of us who would support what we've just walked through. And then the one addition, as the city attorney mentioned, was, and you put it much more articulately than I could, but essentially it's just a prohibition on having a passenger unless there's a seat for your passenger.
Right.
In other words, your bike is designed to carry a passenger.
And now the one clarification, you wanted that to apply to bicycles as well, so not just the e-bikes? Does that make sense?
That could apply to bikes, that's fine with me. I mean, but are we doing e-bikes on this? Can we
So that, I mean,
regulate
that,
bikes?
yes, I mean, that the section title is use of bicycles, e-bikes, and other wheeled devices. So if that's the will of the council, we can include bicycles for the requirement such that you must have a seat for a passenger.
I'm really only interested in it for e-bikes.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about, like, you know, when we were kids, we'd ride a beach cruiser with our buddy on the handlebars or on the pegs in the back or whatever the case may be. The simple reality is that a bike without a motor goes a lot slower. You know, with the speed that e-bikes can reach, having passengers draped all over the thing for a bike that's not designed for it is a much higher risk endeavor, it seems to me. And so my mind is just add that prohibition specific to e-bikes. They have to be designed and have a seat for any passenger. Are there 4 council members who support that addition to the ordinance?
You don't want to include regular bikes onto that. And why is that?
I just explained, because e-bikes go a lot faster than conventional bikes. So it's a much higher risk activity to carry passengers when the bike isn't designed than it is when you're talking about.
Is that restriction citywide then? That's not just on the Strand, that's citywide.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
I wasn't
So,
sure about that, okay. That makes sense.
Are you in support?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. You? All right. I think that covers it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if it's time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Mr. City Attorney, we've talked through a lot of stuff. Do you have a,
I have it all dialed down, and so I
and
can.
you have the recording, so the
Right.
motion should just simply be to move the draft ordinance as amended
Yep.
in our discussion, in our deliberation here.
That would be perfect, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Do you think it would be worth it just to read it out loud while we're doing it anyway, just so that we're correct? Whatever. Okay, I think we should just, the attorney should just read through it. But I move that we waive reading in full of an ordinance and declare that said title, which appears on the public agenda, shall be determined to have been read by title, adopt an urgency ordinance regulating electric bicycles in the city, and adopt a resolution specifying fines for violations of the urgency ordinance with the following changes. Mr. City Attorney.
Perfect, and I can go quick here, Mr. Mayor. The sentence shall be deleted in section 10.12175A1, beginning with unsafe manner and ending with other existing law. The subsection 5 shall be added to that same section, saying no person riding or operating an electric bicycle, motor-driven cycle, pocket bike, or any other electric or motorized conveyance shall transport another person upon the electric bicycle, motor-driven cycle, pocket bike, or any other electric or motorized conveyance unless such passenger is seated upon a separate seat attached to the vehicle. Going down, the last sentence shall be deleted in its entirety in section C2. And I believe that is it, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no e-bikes in the greenbelt, that's already written in. No seat, no passenger, that's,
I just added that, yep.
yeah, okay, good. Then that is my motion.
Okay, just one clarifying question, Mr. City Attorney. I think we need to make a clerical correction to section A1, because if we strike the sentence that you indicated we strike, it will read, unsafe manner can also be defined as operating in such a way as to constitute a danger, et cetera.
And so unsafe manner, we would just change that unsafe manner means.
Operating in such a way as to constitute a danger. Great. With
Yeah.
that, I will second the motion. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I hate to throw a little wrench into this, but part of the reason that I was asking about Councilmember Detoy's position, I thought, I heard you state that you thought it was okay for e-bikes to be allowed on the Strand with the motor on. You were just talking about banning e-bikes completely, right?
Nobody ever said.
No. I always stated that I have used my motor on the e-bike hauling my 80 pounds of kids behind me. But speed is the issue.
Right.
Right, and
So,
I
And
think.
as we all talked about, we have great motor officers and other officers in the
right.
department who can, if someone is slowly motoring, I don't think they're going to be the issue. If you're cruising 95 miles an hour, hopefully they pull you over.
so are you in favor of allowing,
The way we have it written right now, I'm fine with.
okay, I was just trying to clarify that because I thought maybe you indicated that you thought it was okay for motorized cycles to be on the Strand if they obey the speed limit, because I thought that's maybe where you
Because
were
if
going.
you are, then we're down to 3 votes and the urgency goes away. So if I was that way.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yeah. Councilmember Detoy was just commenting that if we were going to add in a prohibition on e-bikes on the Strand, he would not support the ordinance. And so that is not part of it.
Okay.
All right, hearing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Jackson?
Aye.
Councilmember Detoy?
I,
Councilmember Seaman?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Francois?
Yes.
Mayor Massey?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Does that bring us to adjournment?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned at 9:49 PM. On Tuesday, June 11th, a special city council meeting will be held at 5 o'clock PM for Planning Commission applicant interviews, followed by the regular city council meeting at 6 PM. Good night, everyone.